Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of 2 Thessalonians
with Dan Irvin.
Well, welcome in as we are walking through the book of 2 Thessalonians. This week we'll be looking at chapter 1. And if you were listening along as we walked through 1 Thessalonians, you know that the church in Thessalonica was a culturally diverse area. Greeks, Romans, Jews. Paul knew, I think, in a sense, that if he could move the gospel forward in this town, he could have a major influence. This could be a bridge for the rest of the world. And, in that kind of lifestyle that was going on in Thessalonica, there was probably a lot of confusion. What should we give our lives to? Should we pursue money? Should we pursue power? Is there a God? Which God is the one we should follow? Is there a one true God? And so Paul's mission was to, in a sense, remove the fog in front of people's eyes so that they could clearly see where they should be going. And now in 2 Thessalonians, he's writing to his friends. And I just want to look at the opening of chapter 1 here today as he encourages those that he's writing to. He says in verse 3, he says, "We ought always to thank God for you, brothers and sisters, and rightly so, because your faith is growing more and more, and the love all of you have for one another is increasing. Therefore, among God's churches, we boast about your perseverance and faith in all the persecutions and trials you're enduring." Just these two verses gives us a glimpse into what was going on. They were not coasting by any means. They were living a life that was under persecution, the church in Thessalonica, that is. And he doesn't open up by jumping right into, hey, here's what you need to do to fix this situation. He begins in a way that I think is right. He thanks God for the way that they are in it, for the way that they are suffering because of their faith, and knowing that their faith is growing as a result of this suffering. Paul sees what they're going through, and his first instinct is to thank God in this moment because their faith is growing, their love is increasing. Now, that's a different way to look at hardship than I think like a secular view of hardship. I think the world views hardship and suffering as trial as unnecessary, as let's just get this out of the way, over with, let's be done with it. Does this even have a place? This is getting in the way of what I really want. Paul sees something going on here that's deeper. He actually says that their faith is actually growing under this pressure. He actually says that in the middle of this furnace, their faith is flourishing. And here's the principle that I think is really important. When the roots are deep in a tree, the storm can't destroy the tree. The storm actually it strengthens it in a way. It deepens the roots. It waters the soil when the roots are deep. And here's a quote that I love from Pastor Tim Keller out of New York City. He said this in a book he wrote about pain and suffering. He said, "Suffering is unbearable if you aren't certain that God is for you and with you." All of us suffer. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's under the surface a little bit. But when life really seems to not make a ton of sense, I don't think it's really the pain of whatever's going on that is the most crushing, but I think it's feeling that we're alone, that they're the only ones that care, that they were the only ones going through this, that maybe God has stepped back and maybe he's watching from a distance, but he's really not helping, or he's really not able to help. God is a well-meaning grandfather who loves us, but he really doesn't have the power to intervene or really do anything about our problems. Well, there's a different picture painted for us in Scripture. Throughout the pages of Scripture, the story is God is moving close to the brokenhearted. Psalm 34:18, one of my favorites in this regard, says this: "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." And then further in Romans chapter 8, 31 through 32, if God is for us, who can be against us? He did not spare his own son. How will he not also graciously give us all things? You know, when life doesn't make sense, where do you go? What do you cling to? Is your hope in things just going back to normal, or is it in the unshakable truth that even in the middle of a trial, that God is for you and not against you? That is the hope that can take us through suffering and can move us past whatever situation we're in.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.